I prostrate to the Arya triple gem. Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagawan was dwelling on Massive Vulture's mountain in Rashagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagawan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of Nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times also manifestly, completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in the reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared: Tayata Om Gate Gate Padagate Padasam Gate Bodhi Soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagawan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagawan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety along with the worlds of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagawan. I prostrate to the gathering of the Dakinis in the 3 chakras who abide in the holy yoga of using space. By your powers of clairvoyance and magical emanations, look after practitioners like a mother her child. Akasamara Sashadara Samaraya Tayata Om Gate Gate Padagate Padasam Gate Bodhi Soha. By the teachings of the 3 supreme jewels possessing the power of truth, may inner and outer hindrances be transformed, may they be dispelled, may they be pacified, may they be completely pacified. May all negative forces opposed to Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May we be separated from problems and harmful conditions conditions to Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma, and may there be auspiciousness and perfect happiness here, right now. Turning to page 15 for Mandala offering. Sashi Poi Jokshid Me Tok Tramadira Bling Shi Nihitigen Pari Sangi Jin la chu pa shugi dam gura nam mandala kam nirayatayami sangi chudan sogi chonam la jangchu badu dabni kyab suchi jagi chinyen gi personam ti drola pancha sangi dropa shu sangi chudan sogi chonam la Jangchu Badu Dabni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chunyen Gipe Suna Drola Pancha Sange Drupa Shu Sange Chudun Soye Chonam La Jangchu Badu Dabni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chunyen Gipe Sunam Ki Drola Pancha Sange Drupa Shu. So he's setting a most profound motivation, Mahayana motivation, bodhicitta, for engaging in listening, reflecting on the teachings of the Buddha, particularly this most powerful sutra, the very first teaching, turning the wheel of the Dharma in this world by Guru Shakyamuni Buddha. Okay, so good morning, everyone. I think we can say Happy New Year still for a little while yet. Chinese New Year, Vietnamese New Year, so like that. So I think everyone got their handout, or those who can, maybe if you didn't get, I think there might be some at the... You've got a few spares. Okay. Oh, they're on all the tables. Okay, everyone has. So I'll just read through. So just setting context. So the Buddha's discourse on rolling the wheel of truth. So this is one translation of that very first teaching. Of course, the Buddha taught the Four Truths in many, many different sutras, but in this first turning of the wheel, so of course we can refer to many different translations, but I just sort of read through by way of giving context, that of familiarizing or refamiliarizing our mind. Suffering as a noble truth is this: birth is suffering, aging is suffering, sickness is suffering, death is suffering, sorrow and lamentation, pain, grief and despair are suffering. Association with the loathed is suffering. Disassociation from the loved is suffering. Not to get what one wants is suffering. In short, suffering is the 5 categories of clinging objects. The origin of suffering as a noble truth is this: it is the craving that produces renewal of being accompanied by enjoyment and lust, and enjoying this and that. In other words, craving for sensual desires, craving for being, craving for non-being. Cessation of suffering as a noble truth is this: it is the remainderless fading and ceasing, giving up, relinquishing, letting go and rejecting of that same craving. The way leading to cessation of suffering as a noble truth is this: it is simply the noble eightfold path. That is to say, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Suffering as a noble truth is this: such was the vision, the knowledge the understanding, the finding, the light that arose in regard to ideas not heard by me before. This suffering as a noble truth can be diagnosed, such was the vision. This suffering as a noble truth has been diagnosed, such was the vision. The origin of suffering as a noble truth is this, such was the vision. The origin of suffering as a noble truth can be abandoned, such was the vision. This origin as a noble truth has been abandoned, such was the vision. Cessation of suffering as a noble truth is this, such was the vision. This cessation of suffering as a noble truth can be verified, such was the vision. The cessation of suffering as a noble truth has been verified, such was the vision. The way leading to cessation of suffering as a noble truth is this, such was the vision. This way leading to cessation of suffering as a noble truth can be developed, such was the vision. This way leading to the cessation of suffering as a noble truth has been developed, such was the vision. So that's by way of setting our framework. And in these next 4 weeks, today I'm sort of giving just a sort of general introduction to the different ways in that first teaching that the Buddha presented, you know, the 3 ways in which the Buddha presented the four noble truths, and drawing, you know, if you're interested for further reading, but particularly for me, what I find useful, drawing on His Holiness the Dalai Lama's teachings on the Four Noble Truths. It's just that some may be very familiar, little book like this. And that was from a teaching His Holiness gave, first time that His Holiness gave this teaching in the West in 1996, something like that, in London. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche's more recent Four Noble Truths. Also Geshe Tashi's Four Noble Truths from the Foundation of Buddhist Thought course. And also the most recent, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Venerable Thubten Chokyi's Samsara and Nirvana, which is part of this library of wisdom, compassion that is being, you know, extensively, you know, the different volumes coming out there. So just saying, I mean, we can refer to so many different commentaries because this was the first teaching of the Buddha. There's so much out there. And not only that, it's common foundation to all the different schools of Buddhism. So you'll get the commentaries from different schools if you wish. And you think about, this was the very first teaching, the Buddha turning the wheel of Dharma in this world for the first time, having been requested to teach. And then, you know, that first teaching, we're not going to go into the whole history here. I'm assuming there's some foundation of knowledge of the history of that, the Buddha's lives and life, that particular life, and being a seeker of truth, and, you know, attaining enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, and then giving this first teaching, you know, to 5 disciples who'd been his fellow seekers of truth. And if you think from 5 people, I did a sort of Google search this morning because, you know, just to have a current figure. I love to have current figures according to Google, or according to whoever keeps these track of the. So the Buddhist population in the world today, said this morning, is 506 million. It's one of the fastest growing religions. So it's quite interesting to see that the relevance of the Buddha's teachings continues quite profoundly in our world. That's why we're here, right, ourselves. So that's approximately 6.6% of the world's population. So it's quite, you know, sort of significant, really. And then 255 million, and I just say this, are in China. So just keep all of this context. And of course, the majority, about over 50% of Buddhists in the world, or people who identify as Buddhists, are in Asia generally, but mostly in Southeast Asia these days, you know, but generally in Asia. So of course, that's probably not news to us, right? And what's interesting, what is very interesting with this, you know, you can get many times of teachings on Four Truths and everything else. So sorry, I meant to say that general framework, and then what I want to go on with in subsequent weeks is looking at the 16 aspects of the Four Truths, misconceptions, so that, you know, unpacking more and more levels. And this is why having again and again reflecting on the Four Noble Truths is so important, you know. You know, when I was at Vajrayana Institute and one of the students, I think we were going to a teaching, I was going at least, I would just like every time, Geshe Samten seemed to always be teaching on the Four Noble Truths. I've found that with Geshe Sultram at Chenrezig Institute. No matter what you advertise that the Lamrim retreat's going to be, the first week guaranteed is going to be on the Four Noble Truths. You can advertise whatever you say, but this is the foundation for everything else. And also I noticed when I was looking at coming here, what did Geshe Sonam taught here? Very first thing, what did he teach? Four Truths, Four Noble Truths, very first teaching. So it's following in the footsteps of the Buddha, really. And so, you know, this student who said, oh, Four Noble Truths, I've been to that teaching, like when I was going off once. Oh yeah, I know that one. Really? And so, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, many times, you know, the teachings many times, different teachers, different students, discussions, and deepening our understanding. So we come to it again and again and again, deepening our understanding. Because I look around here and some of you are, can I only just say, very long-term students. So it's not unfamiliar to you. Maybe for some it's a bit less familiar, but I think we get the general framework structure. So in this teaching on the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha is simply describing our experience, because it may not pervade that we experience the second bit, the experience according to the Buddha's own vision through his own experience of samsara and nirvana, which are mental experiences. It's not something out there as all the Buddha's teachings taught. It's about our mind and how we engage with every moment. So, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, the first teaching the compassionate Buddha gave, the Four Truths: true suffering, true origins, true cessations, true paths. That's the Four Truths. They cover our present state, number 1 and 2, one replete with unsatisfactory conditions, states of mind, which in the Sanskrit, dukkha, suffering, but also not just sort of physical suffering, as we've got a whole list of things here in the presentation of the sutra, a whole bunch of stuff, but the pervasive discontent, dissatisfaction that pervades every moment of existence, no matter where we find ourselves, whatever conditions we find ourselves in, right? So our present situation and the origins of that, so understanding that this is due to past imprints coming from past lives that arrive us in this state, and particularly our experience based on our misconceptions that are not in sync with reality, which is the things that cause us more suffering. If they're in sync with reality, that causes more happiness, and that's what we want. Okay. And then the Buddha presents an alternative. You don't have to do this. You don't have to keep doing this. There is a state of nirvana, of true cessation, and the path leading out of that. So here, as said, Eightfold Noble Path, we have the presentation of the Lamrim and so forth. We have different ways of presenting that path, the true paths, right? And it's like, you know, we need a roadmap to get anywhere, don't we? You know, so a roadmap isn't so the Buddha presenting this roadmap, this structure, is not it, like we have to do it for that to occur, but it represents what to do. It's like, you know, we have, you know, when I remember when in the early days, at least that I engaged with Google Maps, and it probably wasn't at the beginning or whatever they were called at that point, your sat nav. And I've decided a couple of times just to follow it literally. And I went down some very convoluted routes. And sometimes I ended up very late for my destination, and sometimes I didn't end up in my destination. I ended up in some weird dead end. No, true, it happened a couple of times. I just thought, I'm just going to really follow and see. So we have to make sure we're following a correct path to get to our right destination. That's the whole point. So we have to know what the right path is, which of course we can only get by listening to the teachings. It's like, you know, they do the modeling for COVID. So it's a model. It's not it, it's the model. The model doesn't say this will exactly happen like that, because then COVID seems to have its own permutations, mutations, and so forth. So, but it gives you a general idea, right? But what the Buddha said is, you follow this path like this. I got the results. This is the vision. This is, it has, these things have happened. In other words, in my experience. Okay. So the Buddha didn't create the Four Noble Truths. He simply described the conditions of samsara and the origins of that and the truth of the path leading away from that. And that bringing about liberation, nirvana, perfect peace. So Buddha is simply describing reality, discerning what to be true. That's why they're called truths, discerning what to be true, discerning the reality that shows why we experience these predicaments. It's not like a God's decided or anyone else has decided that, oh, you need a good dose of suffering, something like that. You know? It's not like that at all. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama, even in that short teaching, you know, in London, His Holiness said, I always present the Four Noble Truths in the context of the two truths, because we have to sort of get a handle on the two truths representing conventional truth, our conventional experience, and the ultimate truth, as we just read in the, well, the explicit representation there in the Heart Sutra. So the Heart Sutra also covers the Four Noble Truths, the 12 links, and so forth, implicitly, but explicitly teaching the ultimate. So this samsaric cyclic existence we find ourselves in, circling again and again, being reborn with karmically conditioned aggregates, specifically these 5 aggregates, as it says in the Heart Sutra: form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness. So the form, the body, we spend a lot of time on that. And we tend a lot of saying, yes, I understand the suffering of the body. Well, ants understand that, animals understand that. That is not a hidden thing. Everyone gets that. Form, feeling, the physical sensation of, you know, tending towards the pleasant, tending away from the unpleasant, as it says here too. And discrimination. So the Buddha, out of all the different mental factors, singled out, so form is the only physical one. You could say feeling is based on physical sensations, but then we determine it to be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, depending on whether we like it, dislike it, or not even aware of it. And discrimination, our discriminating perception that can tell this from that, that can distinguish objects and so forth, just like when we study low rig awareness and knowers, or mind in its potential, so forth. And compositional factors, all the other mental factors we study, whether they be the way we engage with objects, the omnipresent ones, the variable ones like sleep and regret and so forth, the afflicted states of mind, the positive states of mind, which positive by nature of being in sync with reality, those ones all accumulated there. I mean, the Buddha, so that's presented as 51 mental factors, but that's not comprehensive. So it's merely like, these are the ones we need to get a handle on, because they all have their other subsets. 84,000 of them, afflicted states of mind. So, but to get a handle on these ones that we work with and to transform our mind, which is the path out of our samsaric suffering, which is arriving eventually, Nirvana, a state of peace, where the mind is pacified as we, in the heart sutra, we go to more and more refined levels, or, in the verses to dispel hindrances, pacified, thoroughly pacified, completely pacified. All negative forces to the Dharma. So anything that disturbs our mind, that's that state, free of all that contaminates the mind, pollutes the mind, all the aggregates, but we're working with the mind through the force of karma inflictions, which is the second noble truth. So the Nirvana, perfect peace, cessation, true cessation, is a state of liberation, of freedom from the two extremes, on the basis of which we engage in faulty actions with our body, with our speech, and then we create more negative karma, and then we go around and around and around, more suffering. So the two extremes, as we have talked about previously, the extreme of nihilism, when we refute inherent existence, things existing out there permanently, in a unitary way, independently, by way of their own characteristics. We use all this terminology because different schools, non-Buddhist schools and then the early Buddhist schools, imputed something like that, some level of that. But when we chuck it out, we over-chuck it out and we over-refute and we chuck everything out and say nothing exists. That's a nihilistic view. It's sort of like we get rid of all of existence, which is crazy because we're here, just saying. We exist. The Buddha wasn't saying, do we exist or not? It was like, how does our mind misconceive that? So the Buddha uniquely presented the view of dependent arising to counter this and other wrong views we have about existence. So dependent means the conclusion, first of all, arising means that things arise, and if they arise, they're not non-existence, they're existence, or they arise or are produced. And this eliminates that extreme of nihilism. So if things arise, how can they be non-existent? It's not possible. They just arise in a matter of dependency. They're not independent. Everything is interdependent. I always think that, COVID, if the world didn't get it beforehand, I think COVID brought it on. It's extremely hidden. You can't see, have I got the virus? In fact, a lot of people being tested never even knew they had it, right? It's so subtle. But the interdependence, just see how that's spread around the world and how quickly, and we're all getting a bit nervous because, sometime soon the border's going to fully open. And the fact that they're dependent, and different levels of dependency we'll look at, how can they be independent? It's contradictory. They can't be permanent because they arise. They can't be unitary. They can't exist independently. My mother said to me when I was 4 years old, I was fiercely independent. And as an adult, I said, no, I wasn't. Clearly not. I mean, if she put me out on the street, I wasn't going to survive. In fact, I put myself out on the street quite a few times. I just went around the block with my little case. Maybe I was about 8 years old. I'm leaving home. My little case with my hairbrush. I had long hair. It's all gone. And my ribbons for my hair. That's what I was going to survive on. So you can see I wasn't independent. I was just stubborn. So when we talk about unitary, permanent, independent, but what it is the Buddha refuting the non-Buddhist schools and saying, no, you've got it wrong. Okay. So this is a hallmark unique to the Buddha's teachings, that everything has the quality of being dependent on other things. Now, of course, in this day and age, we look around and we go, isn't that self-evident? At some level it is totally self-evident. And then, you know, Lama Tsongkhapa in Praise to Dependent Arising, exactly that, praises the Buddha for this unique teaching, saying, of the suffering existing in the world, its root is none other than ignorance. The understanding to kill this root, you said, is none other than dependent arising. So when we look at the 12 links of dependent origination, which is also there, elaborated in, well, not elaborated, implicitly there in the Heart Sutra as well. Starts with ignorance, the ignorance within the 12 links, you know, represented by the blind person, you know, not seeing, that's the thing, is getting it wrong, having wrong conception, wrong views, which is the blindness that we have, the blindness of ignorance. Okay, so that's killed by the reasoning of dependent arising. And by the reason of dependent arising, one will not depend on extreme views, either extreme. So it refutes both. This is the excellent teaching, my protector, that renders you orator supreme. So it's a praise of dependent arising. So just as we recited in the Heart Sutra, form is emptiness, emptiness in form, the two levels of the two truths, you know, explicitly presented there in the Heart Sutra, conventional truth, ultimate truth. So all of this, everything, all our experience is by nature empty, and this arises from that. So, and the idea that this is not contradictory but complementary. And Lama Tsongkhapa explicitly said that because there was the view around that these were contradictory. You know? So having to refute to help people get to the right conclusions. That's the whole point of the Buddha's teachings, to help us, you know, follow correct path. So that because the two truths, the dependent arising is able to eliminate the two extremes of nihilism and permanence, shall we say, we'll use those ones. I mean, it gets translated in many different ways. And it's good to look at the different translations. It said the king of reasoning, in other words, the most powerful. The king, with the analogy of that was the most powerful person in the land. So no other reasoning other than that is able to eliminate the two extremes simultaneously. So even the fourfold reasoning, we use this fourfold reasoning to establish the ultimate, you know, identifying the object of negation, this inherent self-existent self, self-sufficient self that I really grasp at, which is the root, grasping, ignorance, grasping at that, you know, self of phenomena. But let's look at the self. So first of all, we identify that object of negation. We interrogate it. You know, what is it that I've got to negate? What is it that doesn't exist inherently from its own side? It's the one, it's like I exist, so we can't chuck out conventional truth. But this I that I see inseparable from my body. So we interrogate where in the body is this inherently existent me, this truly existent me, this, you know, permanent me, this unitary, independent, fierce little me that leaves home. And where, if it's not, if I can't find it in the body, if I maybe it's in the mind, which moment of mind? So we interrogate, is it in the body-mind continuum? Is it other than that, outside? You know, is it both? You know, so we do all that interrogation. It's unfindable, but it doesn't help you realize how things actually exist. Right. So whereas, you know, the reasoning of dependent originations, right, so it shows you how they exist. So it's the two truths simultaneously. So we look at this in terms of the dependence on causes and conditions. Nothing happens just by chance. There are no such things as, oh, it was luck, it was coincidence. No such thing, the Buddha said. Everything's dependent on causes and conditions. All the Buddhist schools assert that, but their understanding of that is, slightly different. They assert it differently. So this level only pertains to impermanent phenomena, obviously, because they're arising, so they've got to be impermanent. They arise moment to moment. This is when we talk about subtle impermanence, the one we can't see, due to the rising of the factors that cause it. And so in the Four Truths, it said that what's the cause of us, our existence in samsara? Our karma, our throwing karma that propels us into this life, plus the afflicted states of mind. So, grasping at having a body or not having a body, of non-existence, of existence, grasping at existence. Let's leave it there. So, yeah. So in terms of the different ways different schools assert this level of causes and conditions, which we say is the coarsest level, the most self-evident level of dependent arising, say, but there has to be something there from its own side. There's got to be some basis out there. It's, okay, that gives rise to a particular cause, that gives rise to a particular result. And maybe some of you have spent a little time discussing sprouts and seeds, and when the sprout, at what point is the seed a seed? At what point is it a sprout? And you go into all these great discussions that it's a sense of, well, there must be something within the seed, in that particular cause that gives that particular result. In other words, but if you say that there's already the sprout in the seed, why would the seed need to sprout? So we have all these discussions about, refuting this understanding and so forth, or at least trying to refine our view. So there's got to be something inherently there. And this is the general view we subscribe to in the world, really, with pretty much absolutely everything, So at the level that we see cause and effect operating, there must be something there that determines what it is. And that this is a prevalent view. It's a prevalent view in the world. But in the middle way consequent school, the most subtle understanding, even at this level, because usually we talk about it in the third level, merely labeled by mind, but even at this level of causes and conditions, the fact that the pea sprout depends on the pea seed proves that something there can't be any inherent existence out there. Because if it was inherently existent, anything, it wouldn't be able to change. And if cause and effect were equivalent, or cause and result were equivalent, seed and sprout, there'd be no process, there'd be no basis, no need to label, because it'd be just no need to distinguish, one from the other. But we can and do observe the difference, we experience that, and we label it that way. We label it seed and sprout because we understand at some level, whatever level we understand. So this view presented by the lower schools absolutely contradicts our experience. So the fact that everything changes shows that things can't have inherent intrinsic existence. Because if they were self-established from their own side, self-sufficient, substantial, so forth, they couldn't be changed, altered in any way. Whereas if things are dependent on causes and conditions, the law of causality applies. And so there's no intrinsic existence. So the middle way consequence school, as propounded Arya Nagarjuna and so forth, and very explicitly, elaborated Lama Tsongkhapa in the great treatise on the path, already proves, dependent arising already proves that things can't be inherently existent. So in when you do, some of you have done basic program, right? So when you study those sort of philosophical texts and in that sort of very traditional approach in the basic program and master's program, usually we use syllogisms to debate and validate the points as we go along. Always take a vase because it's whatever's on the table, right? So we say the subject vase. So take the vase, subject. It does not inherently exist, predicate, we say. And then we have to find a reason to prove that. We don't say, just as the Buddha said, don't just take it just because I said it, you prove it. So we need to provide a reason to prove this thesis because it depends on causes and conditions. So this type of reasoning, we posit existence based on logic. And this is what the Buddha was logician. Use rational, use your wisdom mind, use your intellect. So the two can't coexist if it's dependent on causes and conditions. It can't at the same time exist truly inherently from its own side, by way of its own characteristics, out there, nothing to do with me, correct? Well, we don't have to say absolutely yes, because we have to interrogate that. And say, well, I'm not really sure, actually. I want a further investigation. Good. But, the lower schools, still assert some self-sufficient, substantially self-existent self somewhere, that makes the pea sprout arise from the pea seed. When they perceive things, they still think like that. And frankly, so do we. So do we. Because we can say, oh, the lower schools, but actually say, check your mind, because check our view of the world, because all of this, by refining the view, means that we get clearer and clearer and clearer and say, oh yeah, I remember studying mind only, and the Buddha taught this 4 truths according to the mind only school. And I just thought, I think I'm mind only, and you go through the different schools, I think that's me. Because you see the aspects at which you do hold those views. It's very helpful, right? So this is part of the logic of this world, the ignorance, the veil of ignorance, the blind person. We all fall under that sway of thinking, believing that things have some intrinsic, inherent existence, simply because that's how they appear to us. And we rely on how things appear to us. But the Buddha would say the reason they appear to us in that way is not because it's how they exist. The reason they appear to us in that way is because of the subtle imprints on our mind of the ignorance grasping at that false appearance to be true, which is called our innate self-grasping that we've had since beginningless rebirths. It propels rebirth, that innate, that wrong view, that ignorant mind. It is what propels existence. Okay. Then the second level of dependent arising is dependent on parts, it's said. So that's true for everything that exists. Whether something's permanent, impermanent, it has some level of parts, the bits that make up the whole. So, you know, the whole, the phenomena, the vase, whatever, is dependent on all the bits of vase, you know, the glass, the potter that made it, where does glass come from? Sand and heat, I suppose. Sand and heat, would we say, when they do the glass blowing? And, you know, everything else. But also, while my eye perceives vase, it doesn't perceive subtle impermanence of vase, which is moment by moment going out of existence vase, right? Moment by moment, well, not arising moment by moment, but moment by moment, on all the molecules of the vase and so forth. So like that. And all the, maybe what goes out of existence after a while, because this one's got etching of flowers on the outside, is that starts to fade, or it starts to crack, or you know, starts to change. Then I see that very coarse level of change. I go, oh yes, vase does change. Yes. We can apply that to absolutely everything, right? But then we have to, you know, because still these lower schools are certain, no, there's got to be something, you know, Vaibhashika, you know, Great Exposition School, something, a partless particle, something that you can't divide down any further. And we said, no, there's always direction, there's always space, there's always temporal moment. You've got the past, present, future moment of that something, of that particle. So we interrogate in different ways how this is not true. So that's hard. That's already hard. And of course, according to the middle way consequence school, which is the one that I say we follow, we embrace, we try to understand. There's no such partless particles, that everything can be, is dependent at the most very subtle level, also on causes and conditions. And then the third level, which is the one that we usually use to distinguish the middle way consequence school from all the other schools' presentation, that the whole, the parts are the whole, the vase, all the bits of the vase, all the coming into existence and out of existence and everything else is dependent on the mind merely labeling, mere name, you know, and that comes up in the 12 links as well. We talk about form and name. You know, we label it vase and then it's vase. And we know at one level we can comprehend that not all beings would see this as a vase, you know, isn't it? Of course, we can easily say an ant wouldn't see this as a vase. It might see it as a mountain. You know, when you watch those movies, there was one, A Bug's Life, and the other one, Ants, and they showed you from it's a kids' movies, right? But it was very interesting to see from an ant's perspective how a leaf moving was like a hurricane. That's very useful, I find, you know, for blowing out. I thought it's very clever. You know, somebody had the foresight to, well, it was a projection of how a human might see, an ant might perceive, but nonetheless, interesting. So we label it that. So here I can say, book, isn't it? So where is the book in the book? You know, it's got all its bits, it's got all its parts, it's got the cover, it's got all the pages, it's got all the text inside, it's got the edges, it's got up and down and sides, and it's got the spiral bound, and it's got space in there, space there, that's direction. It exists at a very, you know, sort of coarse level. It exists. This exists, it's here. I can feel the weight of it, that's part of it. That's part of its parts. But it's on the basis, we say, suitable to be labelled book. Right? So there's got to be some basis of designation, something to designate, something that discriminating awareness perceives that's separate from the space around it. Oh, it's gone down. On where? Is that better? It may not move so much. And at the same time, looking at the two truths, so conventionally it exists. It's a conventional truth that there is a basis of designation. It's designated by that as valid, conventional valid cognition. And it's accepted that, renowned in the world as book. It doesn't get, someone doesn't come along and say, that's not a book. And it's not refuted by ultimate valid cognition. That's how we assert the existence of books. So it exists, but also the emptiness of the book also exists. And emptiness is an impermanent, that the emptiness of the book is also arising moment by moment by moment. So the emptiness of the book right in this moment is different to the emptiness of the book in a few moments' time, or the emptiness a few moments ago, and so forth. So this is how we assert the two truths on the basis of designation. So if there's no book from its own side, where is the book? We spend so much time on this stuff. Sometimes it drives you crazy, doesn't it? But where is the book? If we say merely labeled, then we have to say we're investigating the role of language, of concepts in creating our world. You know, as Lama Yeshe said, we all create our own universe, our own individual universe. It's true. You know, we create our own world. So how we experience anything is according to our beliefs, our cultures, our philosophical view, just like all the different schools of Buddhism, even though their views, even the lower schools, much more refined than previous views. But, you know, sort of different philosophical views that we come along with. I remember when my father started studying philosophy, both him and my mother went to university as mature age students. And as mature age students, they were mature age, they were in their 50s. Sorry if you think that's not mature age. But I think in universities, like when I first went to university, I had a friend who was a mature age student and she was like 29. It just meant you didn't go straight from school, I think. But anyway, I remember my dad studying philosophy and what makes a tomato red and is a tomato red. So it would have been fun doing it from a Buddhist perspective. But yeah, so looking in terms of Western philosophy. But it's the stuff of philosophy to discuss this. So we examine the role of this. For example, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, when at Swayambhunath with Nick Rebush, and Nick Rebush told the story at the last Lamp on the Path in North Carolina. He was the retreat leader, and he said there they were at a Swayambhunath, which is a big stupa, natural crystal stupa, Rinpoche says, in the mountain. But around that, this, you know, stupa up the top, people have been there in the circumambulate around the bottom, all the prayer wheels and so forth. And they're up the top, and see Hindus go there and do their practices, and the Buddhists go there and do their practices, and the monkeys go there and take your water bottles and your rice. Like when I first went there and someone came along and gave me rice to offer to the, you know, to make offerings. And I was having my lunch, and so I just popped it next to me, and next minute it was gone. Monkeys took it. So everyone's doing their thing according to their own understanding. Rinpoche said to Nick, what do you see? And he said, oh, mangy dogs and honking horns, and it's all polluted down there, and, you know, people are unhappy. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, I see a pure land. So it's all dependent on our view. It's all dependent on our view. So a lot of beings don't have language, but they still have concepts, isn't it? They have concepts of the world they inhabit and how they relate to that. Even babies who don't have language, we can see that, you know, very well aware of the world around them, and they have concepts, ideas of things. They know what it means to get the mother's milk. I think they learn that. I think that's a bit innate, isn't it? I was watching some program last night about, what was it, animals in the cities. It was a possum. Possum has a pouch, right? They said possum's very much like a kangaroo. Really? Anyway, the baby possum, who was too big for the pouch by now, was still trying to get in there. I think Mum was saying, "Kid, get out of here. Go find your own food." And anyway, they know how to find the food, right? They do. Right. They know, you know, they scream when they get hungry because they know they'll get the food that way. And that's why in that program, they're saying, well, animals know. Why do they come and why do the possums come into the house or whoever come wherever? Because they know there's a food source there. That's why. Having spent a few years at Chenrezig Institute, I can assure you the possums, the bush turkeys, all the birds, everybody arrives on your deck. What are you going to feed me? I mean, night and day, because the possums are at night time. The bush turkeys get very obstinate. If you don't feed them, they start pecking your door down. Come on, I know you got it in there. Right. So in the end, the only way that things can be established is through this level of dependent arising, of labeling things, you know, causes and conditions, parts, everything, all of those bits are merely designated as well. This philosophical view is merely designated as well. Everything, its existence. So it's not nihilism. Lama Zopa Rinpoche says it's almost as if things don't exist, but they do. Sort of nominal existence. You have to sort of get at, it's merely I've imputed it that way. I've labeled it that way. It's the least level that we can insert is how things exist is by name, by designation. I just find it fascinating. I always love the interrogation. So the baby's born, they haven't got a name yet. When does that baby become John? Because then we have a whole other story once we put literally a label of a name. And we might even associate it with every other John we've ever known, or why did you call your child John? Aren't there enough Johns in the world? No, sorry, anyone John? Just checking. I thought there was no Johns here, it was safe. Good, I was right. But, you know, it's interesting to just reflect and think. So coming back to our book, yes, it does exist, indeed. It's established by valid cognition. It's not refuted. Nobody said, what are you talking about, book? Good, a few. So there's always that basis of designation. So I can't say there's an elephant in the room, because immediately it's going to be contradicted by everyone else here in the room, right? Because there's no such elephant. There's no basis of designation of elephant here. So it's not like we don't just make things up. What we do somehow, we elaborate on what is there on that basis, but we don't just invent them. That's not the point. And this is like not point of the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha didn't invent this. The Buddha is telling us this I have found to be true. That's why they're truths. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche at, I don't know if it was the last Lamp of the Path, one of the Lamp of Path retreats, North Carolina. I'm so excited that, just saying, you've been, Leslie? You went last, how many times? Was that the last one? Yeah, it was the last one. And now it's going to be on in August, online. I remember going to the last one. Before I went to the last one, I thought, well, first of all, I was never supposed to be the one going to the first one. I somehow had the karma to go to them all. You know, the conditions came along. And then, of course, COVID and whatever, and you thought, oh, well, that's the end of that. And then now it's going online. I thought, well, all the conditions going well, the internet working and so forth, and timetables, can go to this one too. Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. Lama Zopa Rinpoche started, so Lamp on the Path, so you know, with Lama Atisha's Lamp on the Path text. One time Rinpoche actually got the text it was after a few retreats, and opened the page, and we were all like, oh, Rinpoche's going to start the text, and then closed it. But, I mean, we've had such rich teaching. Of course, we've been having the Lam Rim teachings. Thank you very much, you know, quite profoundly at those retreats. And then Rinpoche said, I think maybe the last one, Rinpoche said, that was supposed to be our last one, but we haven't really started yet. So I think we've got to have number 6 and number 7 and number 8. I just think for the rest of our lives. Why not? Anyway, Lama Zopa Rinpoche encouraged, this is how he encourages us to practice this in meditation. He said, think, book, me, whatever. It's empty of existing from its own side inherently from the point of view of ultimate truth. All the things we're relating to in the world, to have that awareness, you know, to have that awareness, we have to have some investigation into emptiness. Like one of the chaplains for the prison project, when we were driving around to prisons in Victoria, and she said, I just like, because she spends hours on the road, or did, she still does a bit. I think she can go back into the prisons again now. Been on, off over the past few years. She said, you know, I just go empty of existing from its own side as she's looking at and driving through fields and trees and cows and whatever. It's a good, useful way to have that awareness, you know, some investigation into emptiness. Lama Zopa Rinpoche says even saying the word starts to chip away at the foundation of this self-grasping ignorance. So I'm going with that. Just saying the word, even that level. And then next, think it's merely imputed, merely labeled by the mind. It's a conventional truth it understands. But to try and get a sense of how conventional mind labels, posits things under the influence of ignorance. And that the mind is nonetheless designating things, imputing. And that mere, you know, it's merely imputed, still it functions. In other words, it exists. It could, you know, because anything that is a conventionality has form and function. A flat-bottomed vessel suitable for holding flowers, we could say, vase. So it's got a form, flat bottom. I can only say flat bottom because all the rest can be so different depending on your vase, but suitable for holding flowers. So it functions. And then Rinpoche says, and then see it as a mere hallucination. Rinpoche loves to use the word hallucination, the hallucinating mind, like we're all on hallucinogens. Well, in fact, the very early students who engaged with Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I think they were, well, they said they were. You know, they'd rock up to Kopan and sit there, oh, cool, these lamas are going to teach us to meditate. This is cool. Anyway, some of them, it's stuff, right? Some of them, whatever it takes. Anyway, Lama Zopa likes using this word hallucination. It's very, because it's a lot of like, makes everything distorted, this sort of false appearance of things that we have to stop buying into. So Rinpoche says, it's like hallucination, like a dream, like a reflection in the mirror. We know that the face I see in the mirror is not my face. Maybe even sometimes we're not sure about that. Maybe we do conflate our face in the mirror with our face. But we know, intellectually we know it's not. It's a reflection, or like a mirage, like an echo. So the Buddha used all these different analogies to help us get at it. And in the praise to Shakyamuni Buddha, there's a verse that when you're at those retreats with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I don't think I've encountered one retreat with Rinpoche where he doesn't at this verse stop and get us to meditate, which is to get us to meditate on that. And that's the verse, a star, a defective view. So there's many different, that's the current translation, defective view. So there's many different ways we can think about defective view, isn't it? So sometimes it's been translation as a mirage. When the shimmering on the road of, been a lot of that lately with heat on the, and it makes it look a shimmering effect in the, on the road. But then when it's not like hot like that, you can see that's gone. So it is quite, it's not out there from its own side, but it has that effect and our mind sees it like that. A butter lamp flame, an illusion, a dewdrop. This is about impermanence, a water bubble. It's quite useful analogies. And when we, sometimes we can relate to our own experience. So this water bubble one, I remember when I was around about the time I was either in hospital with pneumonia or out of hospital with pneumonia at that time. And I had that sort of feeling of, oh, life is really like a water bubble, because you're sort of, when you've got pneumonia, you're sort of gurgling and, there's a bit of water going on, shall I say. So I was like, oh, it is. It's like that. A dream. So we get the dream. We think it's real. Even the guy who did Proof of Heaven. Have you read Proof of Heaven? So it is a neuro brain surgeon who totally poo-pooed the idea of past and future lives. He totally poo-pooed the idea of near-death experiences that people, his patients, were reporting on the operating theatre. And so it's just their hallucinated minds, until he was in that situation himself. And his belief, and now he trains other brain surgeons, that there is some other existence. He said it was real because it appeared so real, so vivid. He believes it as real. This is what we do. We believe it to be real, like our dream. Of course, when we wake up in the morning from a dream, we say, well, that was a dream. Phew, sometimes, depending on the dream. Oh, that's a shame if it was a nice dream, when you sort of move and go, oh, damn, I lost the good feeling of the dream, grasping. So like that. But anyway, he wrote Proof of Heaven, and then he describes his experience of what it was like when he wasn't alive, as he put it, in this body. It was a whole week. He suffered some brain damage, but they managed to get recovery. Amazing, took about 18 months. But you read it, I read it. At first I tried to read it thinking of, well, can I identify the dissolutions at the time of death? And I got to the earth element, water element, when it sort of got muddy. But by the time of Angel Wendy, I thought, okay, this is where we part company. But it was real for him. He said, no, it was another existence. It wasn't a dream. It was real. So we do have this, don't we? Grasping. Lightning, gone in a flash, a cloud, see all causative phenomena like this. So we look at it from ultimate, we look at it from conventional. And so Lama Zopa Rinpoche has us stop here. Kamara, rib, pause, long meditation, then we go on. It's a good meditation to do. Just saying, following in Rinpoche's advice. So, as I said, Lama Zopa Rinpoche likes this idea of hallucination because we're hallucinating that things appear to be concrete, existing in a self-established way. In other words, it's like we're under the control of hallucinations. The Buddha would say we're under control of our misconceptions of the ignorant mind. But just to remind you, don't chuck the baby out with the bathwater. We're here. And Lama Tsongkhapa, when he had direct teachings with Manjushri, sought clarification, and as Manjushri indicated to Lama Tsongkhapa, we do have to value conventionalities, our conventional experience. Thank you very much, because I need it. And it's part of the process of dependent arising, so the different levels. So the conventional world functions just fine. And we're not changing anything about that. We have to get this level of, yep, it's not where the problem is. The problem is our understanding that what appears to us is not what exists. So we just got to, we use this as our analysis. And as His Holiness says, we, on that foundation of the understanding of the two truths, and we use that to go on for our understanding of the Four Noble Truths. Noble truths, why? Because they're truths for the noble Arya beings, those who have the direct perceptual realization of evidence, of emptiness, perceiving reality as it is, not with all these no hallucinating minds directly. And in unpacking this, the Buddha gives us, a framework, a structure, a model to how to develop ourselves on the spiritual path, the Four Truths, Four Noble Truths. Establishing a path to liberation. So as His Holiness says, in this context, then turning to Buddha, Dharma, Sangha for refuge, the three jewels, and guidance of our teachers, it all makes sense. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. And as Lama Zopa Rinpoche also validates in the Four Noble Truths, that our happiness, our suffering are all part of life experience, do not come from the external world. And of course, there's part of our mind will say, yes, it does, all of it. Well, we may not say all of it because we're Dharma practitioners, but we have to interrogate to what level I believe it exists out there. But as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, it all comes from our own minds, from within our own minds. Our suffering comes from the afflictions within our own minds, and our happiness comes from the ripening of virtuous karma within our minds. So the innate clarity of our own minds is the foundation, the basis of which we experience every happiness. As I said, it comes with the blessings of the Buddhas. Lama Zopa Rinpoche says further, until we understand the cause of suffering, the second noble truth, no matter what our intellect, our intelligence, our education, no matter what success we may have achieved in life, he says, in our heart, it's like there's something missing. There's no real peace, which is the third noble truth. The heart is hollow. I find this really useful. There's like the gap, there isn't the core, this is a really helpful way of thinking about it. So until we get that something is missing, not quite as it should be, and we sort of don't know why, this is the mind of dukkha, of dissatisfaction, of discontent, of being unsettled. That's most of our experience, isn't it? Really. Even when we're meditating single-pointedly and the dissatisfied mind arises, it's like, damn, and then we get dissatisfied with Wemo. So His Holiness says, to transform our minds into one of happiness, we start by pacifying the mind, and then we have the whole presentation on developing single-pointed concentration, shamatha, refining, according to the 9 levels of pacification of the disturbances of the mind, which is already quite a tall order. So this is the first thing, as His Holiness says, that we do, separating the mind from the causes of suffering. Take a step back. I mean, right now we can say, I can take a step back, but it doesn't pervade, Next moment, I'm totally conflated with all of that.
So we just keep, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, when he was asked, I think I've used this example before, when he was asked, when Kerry O'Brien was the anchor for 7:30 report, and he asked His Holiness, there was a time of a big crackdown in Tibet, was when they people came out of the monastery, you'd be shot. They were all like, the military were around the monastery. We saw bodies, monks and things. Yeah, it was a very, very tough time some years ago. And Kerry O'Brien said to His Holiness, when you see what's happening in your country, don't you get angry? And of course, His Holiness said, I observe. So from this tape, detached from that, I observe the anger arise and I observe it fade away 1 minute. And he said, the reason I can do that is because I've meditated since I was 6 years old, right? But even like His Holiness had said in recent years, I remember not the most recent years, I haven't heard His Holiness talk like this. He did do a teaching. Did anyone tune into His Holiness teachings in December on the for close up Satipatthana Sutra, or close applications of mindfulness? Anyway, so he's taught yeah. So, but what I wanted to say, finish that sentence. His Holiness has also said that he needs to spend more time on shamatha. It's like, well, if His Holiness needs to spend more time, you know, way to go. Lama Zopa Rinpoche also says, you know, separating this mind from the causes of suffering is what true paths means. And when this happens, we have the liberation, the cessation, so the third and fourth noble truths. So that is true paths, the process by which we separate that and all the practices we engage in relation to that. So right speech, right action, right livelihood, and so forth is about the Vinaya, is about ethical discipline. It's about, you know, and then we have right intention, our motivation, right view. So in the context of the right view and developing, you know, right concentration, right mindfulness, we have to interrogate what those are and do it correctly. Arriving at the wisdom, realizing emptiness, which is the true freedom. As Rinpoche says, then we're able to cease even the very subtle mental imprints of negative actions, speech and thought. Enlightenment. Sense. But it takes a very long time. You know, as the Buddha presented, arriving at this state, we're talking about 3 countless great eons, but in terms of Buddhahood. But for the direct perceptual realization of emptiness, that already countless great eons, you know. Just a lot of work to do. So the Buddha presented the 4 truths then in this order of, you know, first of all, presenting, okay, this is the result and this is the cause of that. This is the result and this is the cause of that. So the result, we identify. What is the nature of it? We identify, oh, I'm suffering. And the different levels of suffering, you know, we go through as in the sutra, you know, it encompasses the 3 level, you know, the presentation on the 3, the 6, the 8 different sufferings. The most subtle one is that of our most subtle clinging, the pervasive suffering of conditionality, in other words, having these aggregates, these samsaric aggregates in the first place, pervades no matter where you are reborn in existence. You can be in the cushy God realms or the less cushy God realms, the jealous gods. I mean, they're still fighting with each other. Or you can be born in an actual, just say, of the hell realm, the gods of the God realms, and or you could be in the hottest hell world, Vici, or one of the others. Or in our we've got all the best conditions right here, right now, us Dharma practitioners, Dharma students of the precious human rebirth, with all the causes and conditions coming to engage in the spiritual path, the 4th truth. So just again, you know, through the force of ignorance, we've been getting it wrong since beginning of this time, which is why it makes it so hard. We're just like, where did this come from in the first place? It came from our mind of grasping, and it leaves those very subtle imprints that give rise to these false appearances that arise, and everything that we engage with, all our actions, our speech, everything we believe and so forth is based on that, our distortions, our hallucinations. So our first, I'll just maybe have to pause after this. The first level of misconception that we have, and given that we're looking at more at the 16 different aspects of the Four Truths in subsequent weeks. Well, more, we're looking at it. This is just a general introduction. So, but just by way of segue, the first level of error is asserting, you know, that assenting to that appearance out there. That is how things are. This is book from its own side. I mean, we don't think from its own side. We don't think. We just accept. Yeah, book, good. So then it appears to be from its own side, and then we assert it as that. So that's the mind of ignorance. So we can say book or we can say person. I find it helpful to use another person because I can see at my periphery shape, which I deduce to be a human form, which I then deduce to be male. And then I label it out there, Len. And I got my story about Len. And Len's got his story about Len. And everyone else has his story about Len. And if we compared our stories, guess what? They wouldn't be the same, would it? That's my mere imputation, my hallucinating, my over-elaboration, my misconception, my false appearance. It's like that. Okay. So we interrogate. That's what has to be removed to attain Buddhahood. Okay. So I'll stop there for today. There's a general introduction. Does anyone want to ask or answer, raise any points? A lot to think about. We're just beginning. A lot to think about. Okay. So, well, food for thought. And then, so what did I got up to? Page 5. Some announcements. So I mentioned what we'll do next week. Just saying, tonight we have Guru Puja Sob here. So I say to people, they say, what's that? I said, it's closest we get to a party in the Gompa. Well, we make all these offerings and so forth. And, you know, it's our devotion to the Buddha, to the Guru, to the teachings and so forth. For anyone who happens to be around tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., we've got the Vietnamese community coming because they're, I think it's now, what's tomorrow, the 12th? That'll be day 12 of the New Year celebrations. It's the same as the Chinese New Year. And apparently a whole crowd, Marlene told me a whole crowd came, both Saturday, Sunday last week. And then another crowd coming tomorrow, a smaller crowd coming tomorrow. But just mentioning that they're coming. And also, tomorrow is Lama Osel's 37th birthday. Happy birthday, Osel. I think Ross was hoping to get a newsletter out with, we had some photos shared from Chen Rezig Institute from when Lama Osel was there with Lama Zoka Rinpoche and Geshe Lama Konchog, and Venerable Gloria was attending, a Spanish nun, attending Osel at that point at Chen Rezig Institute when they were doing puja and so forth. And he taught all the kids, he was little toddler, 1987, teaching the kids on Mani Padme Hum. Sweet. Anyway, so she's hoping to share those photos with folks, but of course we always offer our long life prayers for Lama Osel, and if we haven't had the opportunity, haven't had the karma to meet Lama Osel in person, maybe we could create the causes for that, you know. In Sydney, and one of the guys working, this guy had been working for Liberation Prison Project, and Oh, no, it was in Melbourne. Was it in Sydney or Melbourne? Anyway, so, and we were there. Anyway, it was His Holiness arriving and so forth. And he said, I was this far away from Lama Oso. And I said, did you go up and offer kata? Oh, no, I just stood there and did what? Oh. It's okay. He was in the same space. That's just my mind. Yeah, so his birthday. And then Sunday we have a new course, Discovering Buddhism, Module 2, so a new one, how to meditate. So that's being launched on Sunday. Any other announcements, folks? Oh yeah, Easter retreat coming up. Shamatha Vipassana. So as you heard, you're not going to achieve that in one day. Just saying. But, you know, presenting the model, the framework, the structure, practice. So that's on Easter Friday and Easter Saturday, those days.
If you have done module 1, you can still join the module.
Anyone can join any module or any week or whatever of Discovering Buddhism. Just like here, you know, people can join at any time. And but if people want to get the notes, then we just have to have people's emails, so that Susan sent out notes to people already who have registered. Yeah, and it just gives you all the, what you said, resources, reading material, everything. Okay, so let's dedicate. Page 17. Gewadihi Sangye Drugyune Nuwahachikyang Mahalupa Deye Sahalam Pasho Jancho Sencho Grimpoche Make Panam Ge Kuchi Ye Panyampa Me Payang Gone Gondu Pelwashu. In the long life prayers for our precious lamas, page 19. Now we've got a number on it. Okay. Jikten Kamji Pende Maholupa Gangle Jongwe Sampeyishinu Adrin Songwe Tenzin Yatsola So Depsu Tushilundrushu. And page 22, long life prayer for Kepje Lamas of Rinpoche. Su shan shin jam gun yawe tin sin yom pawe kon so po se chu sum ko we le mo tu do pa da su do je do nu ja. One life prayer for Tenzin Osu. Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those to be subdued, makes clear in the light of your well-spoken advice the sacred Ganden tradition, essence of Buddha's teachings, O foremost and holy Lama, to you who are supreme, O Lama, please, please live long. And have a very happy birthday. Okay, thank you very much.